The lead singer there of Imagine Dragons, a guy who grew up so anxious, created such powerful music. People talk about, I want to be myself.
Yeah, right.
Well, what is that? What do you mean, be myself?
If you forget yourself, you become yourself.
Social media,
Correct.
not having mindfulness, not having exercise routines, good relationships, social skills.
If there was any idea that maybe this person isn't liking me anymore, or maybe they're not going to spend as much time with me, I would get panic attacks.
And to be blessed with having access to the internet so early, I went to go find help for myself.
If I'm fully attached to this idea of being a coach, then all of a sudden it becomes this mask I can't take off my face.
Do you dialogue with your anxious part?
Yes, I do,
Yes.
but I don't.
Thank you for dropping in with me today. Why I was really excited to share you with my audience is because of your experience with social anxiety. And your experience making connections and connecting deeper with yourself. I realized in the last 2 to 3 months that I really want to focus more on teaching social skills.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. It's such a valuable skill to have.
I agree. Yeah.
Business,
massively.
relationship, happiness. And I know what it's like you probably do, to feel really anxious.
Yeah.
And I've had body shakes and can't
Yeah,
even
yeah,
talk.
right. That's right,
You
yeah.
know? And now, both of us can, have a good conversation and feel comfortable and etc. So maybe just do a little introduction of yourself as well, because we haven't done that. Maybe share a little bit of who you are. And then if you can lead that story into social anxiety and that piece, we can touch on that.
For sure. I guess the real simple brief is that I'm studying biomedical science, bachelor, minoring in neuroscience. I'm also an anxiety coach, have been for 5 years. And I'm also doing some work with a psychologist. I'm her research coordinator, so I just manage her research. She's currently building out a startup over in the States.
Cool.
And I help cater to the support around research there, which is something that I love doing.
So sick.
And
awesome.
So how I got into this actually has a lot to do with the whole topic around social anxiety, is because I did have crippling anxiety. Initially, it started out as depression, major depression I was diagnosed with. So that would go through multiple major bouts, as major depression tends to create for a lot of people. It will come in waves of months or even longer sometimes.
Yes.
And so I grew up with this for most of my young years that I can remember. And then as I started to get more out of my shell, anxiety started to come forward because I was exposed to
Which is actually
more
a good
stimulus.
sign, I think. No?
In a sense, yeah, because I was starting to get more confident to put myself out there. But the trade-off was that I wasn't ready for it. And so, of course, so much anxiety. I know how to be social very well. I tried to be. I was definitely a chameleon when it came to that, but I didn't really stay true to myself in any shape or form, because I would always try and mold myself into who I thought I had to be.
Yeah, you became that chameleon dog.
Yeah. That's right. Became really attached to the identity of being a nice guy. And so anytime, because it was always, Kieran's so nice. I really attached myself to that and would betray my own values and my own needs in order to fulfill this identity of being Mr. Nice Guy. And so that's sort of how I managed to fit in. But of course, alongside that, many other things like not being okay with myself led to strong attachments in relationships, friendships, romance. And this led to me being completely afraid of losing any of this or being judged in any of these areas of my life. And so, of course, massive visceral reactions in my body whenever I thought that could happen. If there was any idea that maybe this person isn't liking me anymore, or maybe they're not going to spend as much time with me, I would start feeling anxious. And when this would happen frequently, or it would build up to an intense amount, especially in romance, I would get panic attacks. I remember the first panic attack I had. I was with my girlfriend at the time. I was 20 years old, and I remember I just curled up into a ball on the couch, into the fetal position, and I started breathing heavily and hyperventilating. And she came over to me. She was living with me at the time. She asked me what was wrong, and I just said, I don't know. And I was still breathing heavily, and I kept hyperventilating, and she kept asking me what was going on. She didn't know what to do. And I continued to repeat, I don't know. I didn't know I was having a panic attack. I didn't know what that was. Honestly, I didn't actually know it was a panic attack until I reflected 3 years later, when I finally had my next, to my knowledge anyway, to my memory, my next proper panic attack, where I had multiple repetitions of panic attacks nearly every day for a period of about 6 months. It was around about, and that's when I really sought out the help that I needed. So I'd had many sessions with psychologists, but never with anyone really holistic focused. And I finally worked with an amazing psychologist called Dr. Nicola Pero, if you've ever heard of her.
I know her. I know her, yes.
Okay,
yes.
So I did a session with her, and she really helped me, and she put me on the right path. And from then I never looked back, and went very holistic with my approach, rather than just seeking out talk therapy or figuring out the content of my anxiety. Rather, I started to explore more context, like what's actually happening within my system, rather than needing to fix everything in my life in order to adjust my anxiety.
1,000%. Which is what we do, don't we?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
So that's been my story. And then, of course, that inspired me to do what I do today.
Yeah, absolutely. Tons of pain in there.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Tons of pain in that story, which is great because it's awesome. Like all that depression, anxiety, because who you are now, it doesn't reflect that. Like maybe there's some remnants of certain things. I'm sure at times you feel anxious. But
absolutely, mate. Yeah.
However, you're not that super depressed, anxious, teenager anymore.
That's right.
And I love that. I love transformation. I love what's possible. Yeah. And there's so many people that have depression and anxiety. And I don't believe it's, for the most part, genetic. I know there's a genetic component to these sorts of things.
Correct.
And that needs to be acknowledged in the coaching space. However, a lot of that is exacerbated by social media.
Correct.
Not having mindfulness, not having exercise routines, good relationships, social skills, attention skills, self-regulation skills. And so I'm really fascinated by, like, for who you are, for your genetic code, for what your, and some people would say your soul's mission, for who you are, your energy, what you're here to do and create. What's the maximal potential of this? Not to be some idealized, version of yourself, but really just who are you and what can we do to fix some of the bullshit that society brought us up in? I'm really passionate about that. So when you look at your own life and you look at the Western world, what are the big hitters that you see create anxiety and depression? Regardless of genetics, the things that tend to exacerbate these potentials.
Well, to your point, social media is a big one. Creating this highlight of what we should be, what we should be doing, and how we should be feeling. And then, of course, the natural tendency is, for a lot of people, including myself for a lot of my life, I've definitely had to fix that, is waking up first thing in the morning, going to Instagram or TikTok, and then seeing everyone's highlight.
One of the worst things you can do.
Horrendous. Yeah. I'm starting my day instantly comparing myself to what I should be doing, how I should be feeling. And of course I don't feel that way since I get up. And nor would I be feeling that way in my everyday life anyway, because that's just incomparable. It's not I'm not living a highlight, I'm living real life.
And sorry to interrupt, but isn't our cortisol also spiked in the morning?
Correct. Well, that's how we wake up.
That's how we wake up naturally, right?
Waking up with an alarm, of course, naturally will spike your cortisol, but that's how we go into a state of waking. And cortisol is energy. And so, of course, we need some cortisol. Of course, too much is no good, as you know. So, of course, we're going to be in that heightened state of stress, or reactivity, rather, I should say, which is why, of course, doing mindfulness or meditation or yoga or anything in the morning, right, is fantastic for resetting yourself. But, of course, that, I reckon, is a big one, is the natural comparison that people start to do. And I'm just reflecting on my own life and the people I've worked with, of course, which then leads to a natural tendency to self-judge, like judge myself, how I'm feeling this way today. I shouldn't be feeling this way, so then I compound that. I'm not mentally clear today, I don't feel myself today, so then I judge myself, so then I compound that, and I end up in a little bit of a rabbit hole and spiral.
Totally.
I don't have these types of relationships. I'm not in this type of relationship with someone I love, or I maybe don't have these types of friendships, or maybe I'm not earning this much money. Naturally, there's a tendency to judge that, and I compound it. So there's always a compounding going on. And I believe a lot of it starts from this tendency to judge based on what we see out there. And I can imagine that based on, looking at different statistics, of course, there's a greater, I would say, exposure to the topic of mental health. So there's more conversation about it. Yeah. But I also believe that part of the statistics rising is something to do with the social media and the media that's out there, portraying this idea of how we should be living, how we should be feeling.
Yeah, 1,000%. And sometimes I'm like, I live in Bali and I have a great lifestyle. Totally. I'm happy. I got great relationships. I got a business I love. I got purpose. And I sometimes am like very authentic in my nature. Like what you see on social media is what you get in person. But I'm also aware that it's natural to want to post highlights. It's almost like, oh, wow, this is really cool. I want to share this.
Absolutely.
And yet I'm conscious of, like, I don't want to be a part of the problem. To
be honest, I think the problem's a lot more to do with the excess consumption of it rather than what people are putting out.
I think I'm giving myself a bit too much credit for my role.
No, it's not even that, man. It's like, I think I've had many thoughts like that too, so I get it. But also, I don't think it's my responsibility to hide my life away from everyone else.
Yeah, exactly.
But I do think it's my responsibility to at least be mindful, for sure.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's my responsibility to hide it. However, I do think it's personal responsibility to decide how I should consume the information that's on my phone, because I'm the one that's in control of me turning my phone on, looking at my phone screen, pushing my finger onto the Instagram icon, and opening it up and watching someone's story. That's my responsibility.
And how you interpret the story once you get there.
Absolutely.
Like if I'm thinking of someone, like when I see someone living a life way better than mine, let's just say, I'm like, let's fucking go. I'm like watching social media. I'm like, fuck yeah. I love it. And actually I find that when I feel my anxious or insecure part come up, I can feel jealous. When I feel my anxious or insecure part come up, I can feel I'm not as happy for them.
Totally.
And so I think that's I think that's the most important part of the conversation around like me, like should I feel guilty for posting my life? It's like, it's actually the individual's responsibility, how they interpret that, even though I play a role. And I think that's very worth noting too is, you know, I work with a lot of guys and they talk about my life isn't there yet. There's this huge thing of I'm behind. I'm not there yet. This comparison, I'm less than. I'm like, I haven't reached some sort of pinnacle moment or status or whatever it might be. And every single person that I've connected with or worked with that have said that, they all have the opportunity to feel so deeply proud of themselves and grateful. The problem is they've been trained to focus on what they don't have. They've been trained to compare. They've been trained to have scattered attention, and they don't have the skill. It is a skill. Self-love is a skill. Confidence is a skill to sit with themselves and feel proud and feel grateful and all those emotions. So I'm just inspired to go back to what we first talked about, the availability and opportunity that there is for us all to do some training.
Yeah,
you know, to be able to experience these things.
Yeah, totally. Are you referring to training up the skill sets of self-love? Yeah. Emotional training, training our thoughts, training our focus, training our behaviors. Like it's all training our bodies. It's all there for us. Yeah, totally. I'd say the best thing to do is look for the lowest hanging fruit for that person. Yes. So what are some common examples of low hanging fruit? Low hanging fruit would be going out for a walk, right? Okay. Would be getting more sunlight. Into the eyes, right? It would be drinking more water if I'm not drinking enough water, right? It would be choosing healthier alternatives for food rather than eating junk that's out all the time, or by being more strict with the applications that I use on my phone. And so maybe using something like OneSec or Opal or something like that, where I can naturally restrict, well, not naturally, but automatically restrict. Feels natural. Yeah, it does. Feels almost, but automatically restrict the time that I spend on these applications that are really, really altering the way I think. So of course it's my responsibility to interpret it, but it's also, I think, my responsibility to try control the consumption of the stuff, whatever it is that might be messing with my mental health. So whether that be the nutrition, or whether that be the lack of physical activity, or whether that be the information I'm taking in. So yeah, I think that's the lowest hanging fruit for sure. And then even just starting with something like anyone can download Insight Timer or something like that. Sure. And then start their mindfulness journey and listen to free 5-minute meditations, and then listening just to podcasts like these, getting good information, I think is very fantastic. These are all great ways to at least start, and I think that's always the best way to start, is the lowest hanging fruit. Yeah, I agree, and that's why I think it's good that we're also sharing this. Like, we're not some like Dr. Daniel Amen or Gabor Mate. They're old. They're awesome. I fucking love them, but they're old. We're young. We're younger than them in comparison. And so sometimes people need to hear the same message from somebody else. I feel like, and so I think that's one thing that we can provide. One thing I want to ask you that I'm curious about, because I didn't know that you had such a awesomely horrible experience with anxiety and depression. Okay. And because you did, I want to ask you your opinion on a couple pieces of language that are thrown around in the coaching community. For example, just choose a new behavior. Just choose a new thought. The idea of choice. I want to get your perspective on the idea of choice, and then I want to get your perspective on the idea of our identity and and how fluid you believe identity is, and the effect that has on our emotional states. So let's start with choice. When it comes to, a lot of coaches will say, just choose. Just, you're depressed, choose to be happy. Or you're depressed, choose a better thought. It'll make you feel better. But that big C word choice, there isn't always as much access to it depending on certain factors. So I want to get your opinion on that C word choice. How much choice do we have to, someone who's in the space of that deep depression or anxiety? For sure. How much choice is there? Like, when you're in a fucking panic attack, how much choice is there? Well, from my experience, almost zero choice, honestly, in that experience, meaning can I change this riveting anxiety and panic that I have at this point in time? I personally couldn't. If they could, fantastic, kudos to them. But I don't think everyone has that capability. And nor do I believe that that is a realistic thing to offer people. I'm actually surprised that that's something that people are throwing around, honestly.
Very
because
common.
I've separated myself from the coaching space a lot because of that, because I, would hear a lot of this jargon that, people would, I guess, cast a belief onto a client and believe that because this was what I could do, you should be able to do it too.
Exactly. Which
instantly
is
without training.
Right.
Yeah. Like, I mean, it's understandable if like they can actually give them practical advice to like, hey, do this, this, and this, and then eventually you can learn how to be more choice oriented around, maybe how you feel. You can learn to change your state, or you can, do this exercise, and maybe you can relieve some tension in your body or whatnot, right? That's great, but being able to just decide in a split second that I want to feel a certain way, I don't believe is a realistic piece of advice at all, especially based on my experience anyway. So that's my experience, but I'd love to hear yours as well.
Well, I think that yes, and I think that also that even that word decide.
Yeah.
So now this is a top-down approach. I know you're familiar with this language. For anyone who doesn't know, there's basically Bessel van der Kolk wrote the book Body Keeps a Score. Check it out. It's a great book. He talks about 3 ways to basically heal trauma. One is the top-down approach, where it's basically a mindful approach. It's a brain-to-body approach. It's changing your thoughts. It's being present. It's practicing controlling your awareness, stuff like this. Gratitude journals. Then there's the bottom-up approach, which is body-based. It's focused on, say, breath work or dance or some type of movement, cold showers, something that's body-based, because if you guys don't know, your body, I actually found, affects your brain more than your brain trying to affect your brain, meaning the vagus nerve that connects all your major organs to each other, 80% of those signals are afferent. They go from the body up to the brain. 20% of those signals go from the brain to the body. Right. When I saw that, I was like, holy shit. That's why it's so powerful when I do a breath session or an ice bath or something.
That's right.
And so when it comes to, and then the third one, just if anyone's curious, was medication. So I don't even talk about that because I don't know it.
Yeah.
But I also don't like it.
Yeah.
I'm biased.
Yeah, that's fair, man.
People talk about it and it's cool and I know it helps. But what I'm saying with your word decide, that's a top-down approach. That's conscious. Where Joe Dispenza says the body is the unconscious mind. It stores all your habits. Totally. So if you can change your body and change it in a radical way, a powerful way, whether that's power in the form of gratitude or love, or it's power in the form of determination or will or something like that, changing it in a powerful way, that will give you more of that C-word choice, give you more access to choice, where you then can make a different decision because your choices are a reflection of the emotional states that you're in.
Yeah, for sure.
So if you can change your body first, I found that there's more of that C-word choice.
Yeah, totally. And that's also part of choice, isn't it? To decide.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And from that lens, I actually do believe that we ultimately have choice.
Yeah, but I think it's a little bit different from the lens that they're looking at it from.
Yeah, when you're in that type of state, you don't have access to choice.
Absolutely, yeah. And of course, like that gives opportunity, however, to learn and to grow and to, the person that you are today and the person that I am today. It's because of those experiences that gave us the data points to learn from.
Yes.
Like, this is an experience I don't like. This is what I felt. And this is what maybe I can do next time to reduce the likelihood of this happening, or even the frequency of it, or the intensity of it. And over time, of course, that frequency and intensity start to come down until the point where they no longer happen. So that's that's really the part of the choice, I suppose.
And again, badass that you're able to make that, cross the chasm, cross the river of change, and make that happen.
Thank you, man. I would love to hear a little bit about yours as well, because I actually don't know about your history with it.
Yeah. By the way, for everyone watching, we haven't really deeply connected, Kieran and I.
Not yet, no.
We met each other at a friend's birthday party.
Yeah, that's right.
Are you close with Johnny?
I met him at Run Club.
So just kind of know him.
Yeah.
And so then we met at a party and just vibed out, connected, tried to make a podcast work, and now we're actually making the podcast work. So my journey, now my audience, I've told my story quite a bit, but for those that are new or just watching, my story began very early in my life when my parents divorced when I was 6. This is like the trauma. This is the therapy description of my life.
Yeah.
There's many lenses to put on my life, but this would be like the therapy lens.
All right.
So parents split when I was 6. Didn't really see my dad from age 6 to 19. When I say didn't really see him, I saw him like once a year. It's kind of cadence. And I didn't know the profound effect that had on me until years later when I was unpacking the effect that had on me, which was, it was very painful. There was an abandonment wound that was created there for me. And so I always had a chip on my shoulder, and I never felt enough. I never felt like I fit in. I never felt lovable. And so I would go through my life. I tried to get validation from women. Luckily, I was actually somewhat of a popular kid when I went to school. Like, I was kind of sporty and cute. And so I actually was relatively a popular kid, which is pretty awesome. However, part of the cost of that was I learned to get validation from my appearance, which led to an eating disorder later on when I was a teenager.
Right.
And I was a chubby kid, and I had all this pressure around foods I would eat from like 12 years old. I remember crying about my body and hating my body at 11, 12 years old, which is so young to be even thinking about that bullshit.
Totally.
And so it was always this constant thought of wanting to be ripped for summer and then having that
I
moment.
relate, mate.
Yeah. Were you chubby kid as well?
No, I would say no. However, that was sort of a time when, Instagram and Facebook was really becoming a thing. And so, I'd hear all my girl mates start to, crave the movie star body. And then
fucking Zac Efron, man. Fucking Zac Efron.
That's right. Bloody Zac, eh? Freaking High School Musical.
Yeah.
But, I would hear this stuff and then I'd look at myself and be like, where's my abs?
Exactly.
Where's my chest? I need to hit the gym. And so that's what I did.
Yes. And then it forced you to like really get into the gym?
Yeah, it did, but also in an unhealthy way.
In an unhealthy way, yeah. Not from love, more from dissatisfaction or hate even.
Yeah.
So I had a very similar pattern, and it led to an eating disorder when I was about 16 years old. I started smoking weed, and I loved it. And I would eat, I get so hungry, get the munchies, and would just binge eat on food. But then at a certain point, I wouldn't want to hold all that food in me, so I'd make myself throw up. To release the food, it's called bulimia, if anyone doesn't know.
Wow.
And it was super rough. Yeah. And so basically the pattern for me would be all this sort of anxiety about not being perfect, not being enough would build up, trying to hold up a certain image to people, was a huge chameleon, kind of popular kid, would wear a mask and be friends with everyone. And then I would like go to a party where I'd feel so anxious, socially anxious. Like I have so many energies around me. I'm trying to please everybody and be perfect toward everybody, make sure I'm seeing the best from everybody. And all that anxiety would build up. I'd leave the party early, go binge eat, smoke weed, make myself throw up. It was a whole thing for a few years. And so that was really the core pattern that started off with what I would language as the relationship with my father, not feeling enough. Yes. And that was actually how I healed the eating disorder that I had, was by healing the relationship with my father and then basically learning how to connect with my body, my emotional needs.
Wow.
And so that was really what got me into therapy. It was such a gift because to suffer at that age, at that level, and to be blessed with having access to the internet so early, I was able, and I didn't tell anybody about this because I was so ashamed of all of it, I went to go find help for myself. Because luckily, for whatever reason, I believed that it could be better. Like I just knew, I was like, this sucks.
Yeah.
Like I'm like depressed. I hate my body. I hate myself. Somehow I knew there was a higher level of happiness available. So it forced me to go find answers. At a young age, when I was 19, I started a podcast and interviewed dozens of therapists, like some of the best therapists in the world in the UK. And they just and I was just selfish. I just wanted to have free therapy. So I just would interview them and ask them all the questions I wanted to know. And I healed through that. And I went to go find a therapist myself. And then at 19 years old, I'm studying all these therapies and getting trained in these therapies. And then at a 21-year-old kid, I was giving therapy to older men.
That's amazing. Wow.
And I had this journey start super early for me because of all that suffering early in my life.
Yeah. That's right.
And so that was one of the biggest gifts for me ultimately. But that was a lot of my journey, was just like addiction, social anxiety, fear of being around people, and then, obviously opening my heart and being the badass, awesome dude I am today.
Yeah, hell yeah,
just
man.
because of that work.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. And so you mentioned earlier around like fluidity of identity. Identity is a funny one, man, because I can talk about identity as like the major idea of, okay, this is the idea of who I am, this is a picture of who I am. Or I could talk about it as this idea of what I'm attached to, which of course identity is naturally something I become attached to in terms of who I am, but I can then go and say the identity of being a coach, for example.
Yes.
And so, I might be attached to this idea of being a coach, and now all of a sudden I start coaching my friends, I start coaching my partner, I start coaching my parents, and that's of course, in my opinion anyway, that's how I don't want to be anyway. I don't want to be that. So I want to be able to step outside of that. But if I'm fully attached to this idea of being a coach, then all of a sudden it becomes this mask I can't take off my face. The idea of fluidity of identity, I believe it's possible to be able to be more fluid with identity, where I might be able to step into that coaching role, put that mask on for that time period that I'm, jumping on that call or stepping into that session. But then being able to remove it, I believe, yes, is possible. But I also believe there's naturally a level of attachment that no matter how hard I work to be unattached from something that I'm active in, I believe that naturally there'll still be, so long as I'm not enlightened anyway. So I don't know if I'm some enlightened guy might say I can, fantastic, but I know I can't, which is being able to step into a role and then step away from it and be fully unattached from the idea of me being a coach. Because I know, let's just say something happened to my coaching business and all of a sudden I couldn't be a coach, I would suffer a little bit. So I know that therefore there is some attachment there, and I think that's somewhat healthy because there's some care there. But at the same time, I do believe that there's a importance in learning how to be able to step away from it and not needing to live it as some embodiment. So that sort of ties back to this idea of being a confident person or a nice guy, like what I was attached to before, right? Yes. Or more so than I am today. Like still, if someone calls me, a dickhead or something like that, right? I'll still feel ashamed. Somewhat, yeah, but the level of shame that I feel will be very tiny compared to what I used to feel exactly when I was younger, where like if someone said that I wasn't a good person or that I did something wrong, the level of shame I would feel would not just be intense, but it would last for days. And I would consistently ruminate on that, and that would be because I had this identity of being a nice person.
This little shame party.
That's right.
I understand. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. So I want to throw something your way. I want to get your opinion on this. So this is such an interesting idea. Such an interesting idea to me, the idea of identity. So you brought up two different concepts that come to me. So I guess so the first thing that you brought up was about being able to tap into. I'm a huge believer in like alter egos or identities or parts of ourselves we can tap into when we need it. Like if I'm at the gym, I can tap into my warrior and get that workout done in my work.
That's right.
That's a certain identity that I have that I can tap into. But I also have a super soft, sensitive side. Yeah. I'm such a softie. And sometimes I just need to be very sensitive and feeling and just relax to myself, which funny enough, I feel more comfortable doing with alone.
Right.
I'm less comfortable in that with other people, which is interesting. Yeah. Which I think is partly conditioning, but who cares? Yeah. Who cares? Sometimes with all this inner work and you figure out things, it's like, who gives a fuck? Let's just live life.
I think that's healthy, man. It's so easy to, like, mate, honestly, the amount of times I've been caught up in this world of work and then not being able to live. And like that's why she did the work in the first place.
Exactly. Yeah. I think what you're bringing up is the idea of self-acceptance, not self-improvement.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah.
I think those are two different stages of the journey where like I'm trying to improve myself and not be like this or try to be like this, as opposed to like, I feel anxious right now, and that's totally cool. Yeah, I feel anxious.
It sounds like a paradox, but I believe that both serve each other in some ways.
Yes, definitely. I love that you said that. So we can tap into these identities when we need them, but I think it's good to do that with an experiential sense of me ultimately knowing that's not who I am. That it could never actually encapsulate the essence of my being, of who I am. That's right. And that's where spirituality comes into play with this work. Yeah. So I think that it's really fun to play with different identities. It's fun to do something totally different you've never done before. It's fun to hold an identity. I'm like, I'm this person. But if you can do that, in my opinion, but when you have the knowledge, when you say, I do this, there's really that aspect of drama, that aspect of play, that aspect of really ultimately knowing this is a drama and a play. It's not ultimately who I am. So I want to get your thoughts on that. And then the second part to this question is the idea of authenticity. So like people talk about, I want to be myself.
Yeah, right.
Well, what is that? What do you mean, be myself?
Yeah, for sure.
And I find, if I may say, that authenticity is actually when we're not attached to an identity or we're not aware of ourselves, that when we're actually just really in that flow, and then many of our different identities we've trained come up. So what do you think about the first piece about tapping into identities, and then what do you think about the word authenticity and expressing our authentic self?
Yeah, totally. Well, firstly, on that point of stepping into identity, let's just say I want to go and do a gym session now. I'm not going to go into it with this relaxed, open-hearted cacao, with a good buddy, and talking good stuff with a friend. Like I'm not going to go into it like that because I want to be intense in that state. Yes. And so the consequence of that would be that I'm not in a creative mentality in any shape or form. I'm in a very intense, one-track minded mentality of I want to perform during this next 45 minutes to hour. Yeah. Right. And so naturally I'm going to require a different state. And for me to get into that state, I know for me the most effective way to do that is to shift my identity in that moment and to go into that state of warrior mode, as you'd say, right? And so how I might do that might be that I'll create an image of who I want to be. Or I might create an image in my head of someone that inspires me or an idea that inspires me and use that as a driver, right? And so I shift my state and I shift what I'm thinking about myself in that moment.
What are a couple other ones that so you just gave one really practical piece, which I love, which is visualizing either yourself in the future more powerful or somebody else that you see as powerful to draw powerful energy from that image. Yeah. Which, by the way, that's very cool that you can draw energy from images.
Yeah, that's
like
true.
That's pretty cool.
I agree. Yeah, it's awesome.
So that's one way. What would be one or two other practical things that you've done to tap into a certain identity?
It would be clearing the slate first. So doing something like a gentle breathing exercise or a meditation where I might calm my state first. And then I might, let's just say, visualize how I want to show up to a situation.
Yes.
So again, it's coming back to the visual imagery. But another way might be, let's say, because that's usually my main method anyway.
Yes.
But if I wanted an alternate method, it might be how can I change my state with my body? Like you talked about already, right? So I might do maybe a more intense breathing exercise, or I might go and do a few push-ups on the ground before I go to the gym, or I might
100%.
try some music that is resembling of the identity that I want to step into, right?
Yes.
So it might be like rock or metal or something, right?
Yes. Is that what you do in the gym, rock or metal?
You like to do sort of rock, metal. I love a bit of rap.
Yeah. But like very much like that.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Yeah. Fuck yeah.
And so I'd say those are the main things that I do personally. But what about yourself?
Well, I'll share my answers in a second. But something you might find really interesting. You know, Imagine Dragons, the band. Yeah. So they have some really hard hitting stuff, some awesome stuff. And what I learned recently was the lead singer. I can't remember his name. The lead singer had intense anxiety growing up.
Wow.
And yet the songs are so powerful and intense, and I love a lot of their songs for that reason. And I found that what's really like one of the things I've done to not even just cope with my anxiety, but one of the best lessons I ever got from Tony Robbins. He's taught me so much, but one of the best lessons I got was training in the positive emotional states, to use that word positive. You may not like that because you may not want to view anxiety as a negative thing. So it might be part of self-acceptance or whatever,
I
but
get what you're going with
you understand where I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. You could alter that for pleasant.
More pleasant. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but I know I'm happy with positive.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
Yeah.
You feel good about that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't mind at all.
Okay. He's like basically. So say I'm working with my anxiety. It's like, what would be the one or two positive emotional states that if I train these to be the dominant emotions of my experience, it would make the anxiety virtually insignificant. It's still there. I'm accepting it. I'm not suppressing it.
That's right.
And that sort of powerful, confident music, I might feel anxious, but when I play that, the anxiety is not affecting me. It's not leading the show. That more powerful identity has come forward.
Yeah, that's right.
And that is one of the key insights that I've taken from him and also Dick Schwartz from IFS, which is you have all these parts. I still have an anxious, insecure part, but it doesn't lead my life anymore.
That's right.
And when I realize it does, if I get triggered in a moment, I pause and come back to a more powerful identity that can lead this part of me and lead my life. So I found it's not about getting rid of these things. It's more about strengthening other parts of ourselves that are better equipped to lead my life. And so anyways, I found it so interesting that the lead singer there of Imagine Dragons, a guy who grew up so anxious, created such powerful music.
That's right.
I guarantee it was a huge therapy for him.
I bet it was.
You know?
Yeah, well, as I say, for many people, music is therapy, right?
Huge.
Yeah. I like what you said about not getting rid of an experience, because I don't believe that's humanly possible, to be honest. You know, at the end of the day, anxiety actually serves us instinctually for our survival. I mean, you know, if you think about any primitive idea of a human being going into a forest, and if they felt no anxiety whatsoever in this forest, no matter the noise, no matter the sounds, who's going to live longer, the person with anxiety or the person without, right? Like the person with anxiety is going to go in there and react to every sound possible and go, oh, I need to be alert of that, I need to be alert of that. The person without it's just going to keep walking, and before they know it, the lion eats them, right? So because they didn't care about the sound that was creeping up behind them. And so the point is anxiety is actually a survival mechanism that's necessary. The problem is that anxiety has been heightened to an extent that's uncontrollable or seemingly purposeless. But it is purposeful. It's just the problem is that purpose is predicated on, you know, meanings that we've made up in our head based on conditions that we've been given. So that's really the big problem that people are experiencing. And so to your point around minimizing anxiety is absolutely possible. But like you said, it needs to be altered for something else that's maybe a little bit more powerful, or a lot more powerful even. Such as the intensity that you talked about. And so I'm a big fan of that.
Do you dialogue with your anxious part?
Yes, I do, but I don't prioritize that, but I do.
Okay, you've experienced that.
Meaning, for example, let's just say anxiousness comes up in a situation, like let's just say right now I start feeling anxiety. Right? What I would do is I would go, and that's okay. I just simply
that's something you say, and that's okay.
I would remind myself that's okay. There's nothing wrong with feeling anxious. It's just a normal human experience.
Yes.
So I just remind myself of that in that moment, and then that shifts my tendency to be reactive toward it and compound it and go stop feeling that way, and then I start getting more anxious about the anxiety.
Yes.
Instead, I just shift that and I stop the compounding straight away.
I love that. I love that. One that I often say is thank you.
Yeah.
When it comes up,
fan of that too.
Thank you.
That's right. Yeah.
And it's like it just neutralizes it.
Yeah, it does.
And so that's a way of getting rid of it by not getting rid of it.
That's right.
But the key is you can't interact with it with the intention of wanting to get rid of it.
That's right.
You have to, even if that's like obviously what you want to do. Obviously you don't want to just be riddled with anxiety in the middle of a podcast, let's just say. It's not your optimal thing, probably. But if you can be really cool with that and just be like, thank you.
Yeah.
I know you want to protect me so badly. Thank you.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And then when you do that, you create the emotion of gratitude or love or compassion, which again, training those other parts of you, that neutralizes your nervous system. You can't be anxious and grateful at the same time. Physiologically.
That's right.
It's two different parts of your autonomic nervous system.
Yeah, that's right.
And so that's why I think learning to dialogue, not from the place of like, I'll work with clients and we'll try to like work with their inner critic, and they'll try to like dialogue with their inner critic, but their dialogue is like, will you shut the fuck up? It's not like, hey, why are you criticizing me all the time? Why do you feel the need to do that?
Yeah.
From a genuine place of curiosity. It's like, will you shut the fuck up?
Sometimes, if I'm at the gym, that's required, right? But for a small portion of time, if I want to be more effective, especially in a way where it stays at bay rather than only goes away for maybe a moment and then comes back more intensely. That's right. Then of course a gentler approach is for sure going to be, for me anyway, definitely more effective.
Yes.
And also it's going to train me for the next time I'm in a situation that's similar to be less inclined to need to feel anxious because I've showed myself that I'm safe in that moment anyway.
Yes.
Yeah. And so it's that conditioning component.
Yes.
Have you thought about different metaphors for, let's say, reprogramming? So for example, like if you were to get someone to walk through a field, right? And that was their path to work, and every day they just walked through that field. And then one day they find that, let's say, because on the topic of lions earlier about the anxiety person walking through the forest of the lion, maybe a pack of lions, decides to start living near that path, and you're like, oh, I shouldn't go that way. I need to make sure that I go a different path to work. And so they start walking through a field in a different way. But of course, because they've walked through the initial path many, many times, especially if it's been raining or it's been bad weather, the dirt softens, and so they've created a track. And so they've got a path through the field in this direction. It's more obvious to go that way, and it takes less energy to go that way because they don't have to find their way they can find their way more easily through this path that's already trodden. And so the natural tendency to do, if I'm not thinking about it, if I'm really tired, is to go the path that I've always gone, because that's the path of least resistance.
Yes.
And whereas going this new path that's safer, that's more progressive for myself to not get eaten by a lion, is going to require more energy, time, and also effort. And
potentially initial discomfort as well.
Absolutely, totally, because I'm finding my way somewhere that's foreign and unknown. So similarly, when we have thought patterns within a situation that's uncomfortable, the brain will always go the path of least resistance, because those are the neurons that are going to fire that are the stronger neurons for that particular reactive moment.
Yes.
And so the consequences are going to have certain thoughts and certain emotions reacting to that moment in a reactionary state to that moment. And if I want to change my state, it's about firstly embracing the reality that this is my current conditioning. There's nothing wrong with that, but this is a new path I can start creating. And so to that point around being grateful for the emotion, or being more okay with the emotion, I'm learning a new pathway in a responsive way rather than a reactive way to the experience I'm having. And over time, I show my brain and nervous system that this new path is actually safe, and I treat that enough times, eventually what starts to happen to the path, it starts to become more obvious. I start to create a path of least resistance in that way. And so I walk that enough times, eventually that becomes a path that's more obvious and requires less energy. And so,
that's a great metaphor. Very neuroscience of you.
That's right.
Very neuroscience metaphor.
I try to be as metaphoric as possible with that stuff. Well,
as we continue this conversation, please bring up new metaphors if you have some, because I'm it's super awesome for me to hear. I love finding new metaphors to explain things, because metaphors are very important to actually relaying information. So I appreciate that. What is, in your experience and in your study of neuroscience, the most efficient and effective way to train in a new neural network? Because I feel like my understanding of neuroscience is very basic. Like I focus on how can I build the most myelin. Okay.
Totally.
And I'm just all about myelin and creating those faster, stronger, more efficient connections.
Totally.
And the only thing I really know about the best way to do that is to make it as pleasurable as possible. The neural connection, like the monkey study where they train the monkey and they program the monkey finger movement like 1,000 times faster or something when it was pleasurable stimulus versus negative reinforcement. And then intensity and like fucking like all your survival energy towards like, we have to fucking do this.
That's right.
The demands that you place produce myelin at a faster rate, which once you get the myelin, then the pathway fires faster. That's my basic understanding of neuroscience. Do you have and how to change patterns? Do you have a more nuanced or just more perspective or more detailed perspective to add to that would help me understand how to create more myelin around new neural networks?
Yeah, totally. And so we'll start simply. And so firstly, I'll say, before I even get into this, I'm still in my studies of neuroscience, so I'm not even toward doing a PhD yet. So this is so far, it's going to be a basic understanding anyway, which is probably a good thing because then I can just relay a basic understanding.
Yeah.
And so one of the easiest pathways that most people can relate to is brushing your teeth. And so when you get up and whatever hand you use to brush your teeth with, I can imagine it's very mindless for this person. So, I mean, when you think about, which hand do you brush your teeth with?
I actually do my left hand because of a neuroscience thing to switch my hand, but I'll talk about that later. But I use my left hand now.
Okay.
Yeah.
And,
it's my non-dominant hand.
Okay. Well, before you started using your left hand, were you using right?
I was using my right hand.
Okay. And for when you were just using your right hand, I can imagine it was quite mindless. Was it something you needed to think about?
No,
Would
not
you
at all.
ever brush your teeth sometimes and forget, did I even brush my teeth today?
Definitely.
Definitely, right? Definitely. It's so mindless because it's so habitual and so mechanistic. And so that's actually an example of a neurological pattern. And because it's a motor pattern. However, it's still part of the nervous system. And the nervous system is, and the brain is actually one organ. It's a singular organ.
Yes.
And the effect of that is that if I want to create a new pattern, I need to be very thoughtful. So you talked about using your left hand now.
Yes.
And so what was your experience in the first week maybe of using your left hand?
Well, my experience was it was like definitely just something to think about.
Yeah.
But what it did for me was it created a sense of excitement and change.
Okay.
Because when you use your left part of your body, it activates different sensors in your brain, which I didn't know at the time.
Right.
So I guess my answer to that question would be, I guess, not as familiar.
That's right.
But created a sense of excitement. I think probably because of the intention I was doing it with.
That's right. And would you have to think about it more during the brushing?
Definitely.
Totally.
Oh,
right.
yeah. Like even just like, oh, fuck, I got to get up there.
Right.
But before I'm just like...
That's right.
Yeah.
So it's unfamiliar and it's not a mechanism yet. But of course, as time's passed, right? How long have you been doing that for?
Since 2019. So now I have much more... Yeah. Now it's almost mindless, I could say.
Great. Okay, yeah. And so that's a great example of maybe how someone might want to learn a new reaction, or a new response to a situation.
Yes.
Right. So if I wanted to learn how to be more pausing within a situation that normally would be reactive to, so more calm or simply more responsive than reactive. Let's just use a social anxiety situation because
I love that.
Okay, so let's just say you're wanting to, in a group setting, become less tense, and you don't want to have as much of a high heart rate, and you want to have a calmer breathing state when you're in a social setting, rather than, of course, a high heart rate, short breaths, and maybe faster speech, right, which is a common symptom. Now, of course, that anxiety state is the reaction, and the non-anxiety state is the response that we want, right? So that's the new pattern we want. And so, of course, if my normal tendency is to be reactive in that anxiety state, that's like brushing my teeth with my dominant hand, because that's the thing that I'm accustomed to. It's familiar. And so when I stop feeling that, it can become unfamiliar. And so if I suddenly maybe one day go to a group setting and I don't feel anxious, it can feel unfamiliar. I felt that as well. I remember when I started to experience days where I wouldn't be as depressed. And I noticed myself questioning it, like
1,000%.
I don't know why don't I feel depression?
1,000%.
And then I'd actually question myself back into a depressed state. Because it was unfamiliar. And so that's always something to be aware of, but that's a natural process in the whole changing of it. And now let's just say, of course, I want to start taking strides to being less reactive within those social settings, the very first thing that I want to start doing is, of course, have an intention, but be very focused in doing it. And so the more focused and present I am with the task that I'm doing, as you were with you brushing your teeth with your left hand, your non-dominant hand, you have to be very focused and present with it. The more focused and present I am with it, and the more mistakes I make as I go along the way, I'll start naturally making more corrections as I make these mistakes, which triggers neuroplasticity.
Yes.
And so neuroplasticity, by the way, is neither a good nor bad thing. It's just a natural process of the nervous system.
Yes.
Plasticity is changeability, and neuro is your nervous system.
Yes.
So neuroplasticity can happen in good or bad ways. When someone gets trauma, right, that is neuroplasticity. When someone becomes more responsive in a positive way, that is neuroplasticity.
When you learn how to speak French, that's
right.
neuroplasticity.
Exactly. That's right. It's just learning.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right. And so if I want to adapt myself, then the very quickest way to do so is to be very focused, and every time I make an intentional change, and to allow myself to make corrections along that change. And if you remember those two main things, that's going to really enhance my ability to create that change, similar to learning French or changing my dominant hand.
I love that. And I would add, if you're asking me, I'd add one more step to the end of that, which would be celebrating the new pattern.
Absolutely.
And positively reinforcing it as if you won the Super Bowl.
That's right.
And even the smallest little things, like if you want to like start exercising at the gym, you do 5 minutes, celebrate that like it's the most massive victory, and it'll be more likely that your nervous system will want to gravitate more towards it. And that's actually why the inner critic vibe, beating yourself with a stick, is not very. It can work. Listen, like it can work actually really well. You're not gonna be happy, but it actually can work. However.
That's right.
Think about if like every time you like go to like study and your brain says you're not smart enough and it's just a painful experience, or every time you go to try to public speak and your brain's like you suck, no one likes you, painful experience. So it's like it's not going to be likely you'll naturally do those good things if there's always pain there, if there's always an inner critic. That's why so many guys that suffer with laziness, I'm going to call this, it's actually because there's just been so much criticism around not doing enough that they would rather just be lazy because it's less painful than going back into this criticism cycle.
Totally, man.
You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So positive reinforcement, celebrate yourself.
Massively.
Because that's just so big.
Something you've probably heard Tony Robbins say, he says it a lot, which is change happens when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change.
I love that. You have to find something you value more than the pain.
That's right. That's right. And so, of course, I can also make my current situation more painful, and that can work too, rather than it being a critique around me not doing that good enough. Like, you know, me going and wanting to change my response in a social setting and then beating myself up because I didn't do a good enough job. I'm now punishing myself for actually trying, which isn't something that I want to do. And that's actually going to be counterproductive because now I'm going to, again, beat myself with a stick until the point where I just don't even try. What's the point, right? And so to your point, acknowledging and celebrating not just when I do it well, but also just my efforts alone, and then celebrating the effort itself. And so it's really important to celebrate effort because oftentimes it's correlated to something that isn't good or is painful or is uncomfortable. But if I celebrate effort, and I practice that in situations like that, like when I put myself out there, okay, good job, Kieran, like good job in trying, you put yourself out there, you actually tried to slow down your speech when you're talking to that person or whatever, right? And then even though you didn't, you will do better next time. So good job, right? And that little affirmation in that moment, right, like you said, will strengthen that circuitry of wanting to actually try it again. But then also learning how to be realistic with where I'm at right now. Am I actually happy with my current situation? Because if I'm lying to myself right now and I'm saying, oh, you know what, actually it's okay. You know, like screw it, I don't need to try. And I start actually creating this illusion of myself in terms of me just being okay when I really don't feel okay.
Which often, by the way, for everyone listening, is a protection from the fear of failing.
That's right. That's right.
Oftentimes that's what it is. And it's interesting. Optimists succeed more than pessimists because they think they did better than they did. And so it brings them back to keep trying. And to come back to neuroplasticity, it's reps.
That's right.
Reps.
That's right.
Reps get you
through that new pathway on the field.
Exactly. You walk that pathway. So it's reps. But if you're a pessimist, or even if you're realistic, because when you start something, you do suck. That's just the reality.
That's right.
And so, but if you focus on that and you're like, oh, I suck. It's like, oh, maybe I don't want to come do it. But if you're like, oh, I did great, even if you actually didn't, you're more likely to succeed because it was a positive experience. You come back.
That's right.
Like John Gray, I don't know what you call him, but Love Research. He wrote, the Mars Venus book, famous book. He was one of his big pieces of advice to women. Often will get questioned, like they're trying to find their perfect match. Which, by the way, I realized that there is more conscious women than there are conscious men.
Wow.
That's been my experience, because I hear so many women, they can never find the right man, and so many men have it so easy, they have no problem with it. Conscious men. And when I say conscious men, I mean like healthy, self-regulated,
I know what you mean.
Positive men.
Totally. Yeah.
So that's like something interesting I've noticed. There's more supply than demand. But anyways, John Gray said, just don't worry about finding the right partner. Just go create some positive dating experiences. Just go out and have fun and have good dates. And then it might lead to something, it might not, but at least you have some positive momentum going, as opposed to being stuck in the story of I can never be good socially, or I'm not good at this, or I suck. It gets you out of that story and gets you some positive momentum, which lets you get the reps and lets you, experience life, which is, if you show up enough, you're not living in Antarctica, you'll find somebody.
That's right.
This is life here.
Totally.
There's opportunity.
And also, to that point, right, naturally that type of thing would build more confidence, which is a positive trait to attract a potential partner anyway.
Yes.
And so, totally. That's just one example of one trait that you'd build, of many. But yeah, I totally feel that, man. And I totally agree.
Well, let's start to wind things down here, which, by the way, I'm having an amazing time with you.
Me too, man.
I'm learning so much. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
It's been great. It's been great. It's been a vibe, right?
Yeah, man.
Fantastic.
Absolutely. I really enjoyed it.
So, but I want to dial down and start to close things out with one last topic, which is some practical social anxiety pieces, overcoming that. So I'd like for you to finish us off here with sharing some really practical things guys can start doing to start making more friends or getting on more dates.
Oh, that's cool.
And just some practical things that they can do.
Yeah, totally. Can I answer one question that you asked earlier that we didn't actually get to, and then I'll answer that?
Sure.
You asked me about how does one live their authentic self?
Holy fuck. That's a great one. Okay, we'll do that, then we'll go with that. Yeah.
So I've got a really short answer for that.
Okay.
And it's something that I learned from Muji Baba. Have you done Muji? And it's just a simple quote, but by reminding myself of that quote as often as possible is a very practical thing to do. And that's just simply, if you forget yourself, you become yourself. And it's that simple. So rather than judging everything I'm doing, practice, I should say, stepping away from what I think I should be doing or how I think I should be acting. And then I practice removing that. And steps like doing a meditative practice to reduce my reactivity in a situation will naturally help me to be more present in a situation, which then therefore would mean I'm less judgmental of myself with every action I do. And so that's an example of a method that can help me to come to a place where I'm less so thinking about every action I'm doing, every word I'm saying, how I'm sitting, how I'm walking, with the facial expressions I'm making. I used to think about that stuff all the time.
Me too.
What face am I making right now as I speak?
And how are they perceiving it?
That's right, totally. And even when I'm walking, I'd think about, what is that person thinking of how I'm walking?
100%.
I'm walking where? Those critical thoughts.
I still have thoughts like that come up. It's still a neurotic trait that comes up.
Completely natural, I think, man. And so, of course, when I'm thinking about myself constantly like that, I'm constantly in this cycle, I am not, in my opinion, living my authentic self. And so in moments, because, of course, I don't live this way, but I have moments where I completely forget myself. I'm, in a conversation and I'm not thinking about myself, or I'm in, I'm playing sport, or, at the gym and I'm just not thinking about myself. I'm just thinking about what I'm doing. I become myself in that moment as myself as I can be anyway. And so I really love that quote, and it really stuck with me.
Super potent. The quote was, when I forget myself, I become myself.
That's right.
Fuck, that's so good. It's so accurate.
It is.
He says it so beautifully. And it makes me think of the idea of present moment and letting go.
That's right.
You mentioned a couple things about letting go. One thing that you didn't mention in that, which I'm sure you're aware of, is letting go of seeking approval from other people. That's one of the biggest ones in social context, is not wanting to get anything from that person.
That's right.
Not wanting to sell them something, not wanting to get their validation, not wanting to have them say yes to you, ask them on a date, but actually being in that place of desirelessness, so to speak, just creating joy in the moment and not thinking about some future outcome you want to create with them, which is a great sales tactic, by the way. It's very just attractive and nice.
It is.
So learning to let go of that, I think, is one of the biggest things for creating friends and attracting people, is just learning to have fun in the present moment and be connected to your surroundings and people. And we're naturally meant to be social.
That's right.
Your authentic self is already beautiful. You don't need to improve it. You're already, when you're a kid, you don't give everyone loves kids. They're playing, they're fun.
That's right.
And that's what we all have within us. There's no need to work on yourself. There's just need to forget yourself so you can become yourself.
That's right. Yeah. You know? And also as well, like, if you think about the type of person that you would want to hang around, like what would that type of person be and what would they resemble?
Yeah.
I know for myself, I generally want to be around people that are living life more fully. So they're giving their all to something or as many things as possible.
Yes.
So whether that be they give their all to sport, they give their all to business, they give their all to...
So that quality of focus and passion is big for you.
Yeah, that's right.
Me
but
too.
also as well, like, that brings out a certain joy in certain people. So rather than it being that they're super focused on it out of a state of not being enough and, you know, bashing themselves to that point, for me, not so much maybe, but more so someone that is excited about it and, you know, wants to do good with it or whatnot, right? And that brings out a certain joy in someone. And that joyousness is the thing that I'm attracted to as a person. And so that for me attracts me to them, and therefore I'm like, okay, well, how can I build that on myself?
Yes.
Well, if I find something that I'm passionate about and do more of it because that's what's obviously working for them, then maybe I'll start feeling that way, and it does help me. And so, you know, that's an example. And then, you know, when I look at qualities of peace in other people, that excites me. So, you know, to be more around them, you know, I'm like, wow, this person really grounds me when I'm with them. How can I bring more of that out of me? What do they do that helps them to do that? And I think meditation, I think, you know, mindfulness practices and being able to create more space between stimulus and response in situations, right? So being more spacious and present in those moments. And so practicing those things helps bring more of those qualities out of me. And so as I started doing more of that, naturally when I would go out into the world and I'd be at a cafe, I'd naturally, whether it be through me starting it, but actually more often just with people starting it with me, because I'm exuding more of that energy or that vibrance, it'll attract more conversation. And so my advice based on my experience to people wanting to create more friends and be able to create more easeful conversation would be to ask oneself, okay, what am I attracted to as a person in terms of the types of people I want to be around, and what are they doing that helps them to create those qualities, and what can I do that's in my control that can help me build those. And that would be the first step, and the second step would be to then now put myself in those situations that exposes me to those people. And I know for myself a big one was choosing a sport and just, you know, committing to something and doing it every week, and then, you know, building a sense of community with with people around me, and then also men's circles. Those were like two
men's
really
circles
great
are beautiful
places to, that I started, and really helped me to connect with other men that were in a similar mentality. Yeah,
I love those ones. That's such a good practical thing. That one about who do you admire? What are those qualities? How can I become like this?
That's right.
Or develop similar qualities? I think that one thing I want to share this just personally to you is one thing that I really love to look for is people who I feel they help me feel confident about myself.
I say that.
So I like being around people that I feel like I leave feeling more confident about myself. Like they love my light, they love my shine, they fan my flame, and I do for them too. But just people that love seeing people shine. That's huge for me. My body turns in when I'm around people that are kind of like pessimistic and closed. And I just that's one really big one that I look for is who do I become around this type of person. Because we're influenced by other people. We're influenced by people's environment.
Totally.
For all, as much as you want to say my circumstances don't affect me and blah, 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 we are influenced by the people we're around. Right. So what parts of me do they tend to bring out? And do I want to have those parts of me be brought out by them?
Totally feel that. Yeah, I love that. I'm a big fan of that. Yeah.
I like that one too. You said basically, which might sound harsh to people, that your presence, although it's super valuable, isn't often enough to create certain high-level relationships, like, say, business relationships.
I agree. Yeah.
Presence is amazing and humor is amazing, and sometimes it is enough. Like, sometimes people just want to be around it, but it's like if you're just, like, sort of in a dead-end job, depressed and anxious, as much compassion as I have for you, I don't probably want to be friends with you.
Yeah.
Not because you're not worthy of love, but because I want to be around people that are lifting me up, not someone who I need to serve.
That's right.
You know, there needs to be some equality there.
Yeah.
And so I've learned to like do an inventory of what can I and how can I bring value to people that beyond just my presence and my humor, which is a huge part of the value I bring. I know is my energy. But what else can I bring? Can I bring resources? Can I bring money? Can I bring connections with other people? Can I even bring hot women? Like, how can I bring value to people that are ahead of me beyond just I know I'm worthy of love. I know my presence is great. But they're busy as fuck, and they only have so much time. So how can I bring assets to the table as well. I think is important to think about and develop.
Absolutely. Like a good question you could ask is, how can I lower the resistance that they might feel to spend time with me? And so,
that's a great question. Yeah. Wow, great question.
Naturally, of course, especially with people with limited resources like time and energy, because their time and energy is
pretty much everyone high level.
Important things, totally, right? Yeah. And so, of course, they're going to have a lot of resistance to the idea of spending time with someone they don't know, especially if it's a lot of time.
Yeah.
And so, a very simple answer. One answer to that might be, okay, well, what if I asked for less of their time rather than being like, hey, do you have 10 minutes? Hey, do you have 5 minutes? Hey, do you have 2 minutes? Of your time. I could lower their resistance by bringing more assets to their table, right? For sure. Like that was a great example.
Yeah.
I can lower their resistance by bringing a nicer energy to their table and to their plate, and right. And so that's a great example. So these are just examples, but of course I'm sure there's more that people can come up with.
Yeah.
But I think that's a really great question to ask. And to your point around like what I can offer, initially, of course, that's something that people might need to build up. But I think a really great starting point is firstly to ask myself what qualities do I want to build up in myself first, and then what skill sets can help me to be able to provide a more effective conversation when I am actually interacting with people.
Yeah, 1,000%.
Yeah.
Okay, let's start to actually close this thing down.
Please, yeah.
What's the last piece of advice you'd like to leave everyone with, and where can people find you if they'd like to connect more with your work?
People can find me most easily just on Instagram, Coach Keza, so Coach and then K-E-Z-Z-A.
Link below.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
And that'll be the easiest way to find me. And then last piece of advice would be pick something and just do it to the best of your ability rather than judging whether or not it's the right thing to do. And so this is something that I've really had to come back to often, which is getting caught up in the idea of, am I doing the right thing for myself? Rather than being able to just commit fully and then finding out sooner whether it's the right thing or not. Instead of being in a state of hesitation all the time and then not being able to perform whatever I'm doing half-assed, right? And so just putting that to the side and being like, you know what, I don't even care if this is the right thing to be doing right now. I'm just like, whether it's the right relationship or whether it's, the right career path or whatever, I'm just going to give it my best right now.
Yeah.
And then I can find out sooner anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a genius piece of advice. Hesitation kills dreams, motherfucker. It kills dreams.
I agree.
And also, don't take life so seriously. What are you hesitating for? Chill out.
That's right.
Fucking do the thing.
That's right. What's the worst that can happen? You fail, you end up back in your bed, and then you think up a new idea and you try again.
Yeah, exactly.
That's right.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you, brother. I
appreciate your time. This was a lot of fun.
Oh, man, I really enjoyed it. Thank you for having me. Yeah.
Such a pleasure. And for everybody watching, this episode coming out weekly. We'll have a more amazing guests like Kieran. Love you guys lots, and we'll see you on the next one. Peace.
Appreciate you. Bye-bye.